We've just had Joe Vitale, who is on our team from Oxford. She has just defended her doctoral dissertation at Oxford on this very issue and this very subject, demonstrating how strongly the Bible speaks of the equality of the genders.
Breaking news, Kwaku's black.
I am. It's a good thing the ban was lifted, am I right? Oh!
I believe that in 1978 God changed his mind about black people. Black people! You can be a Mormon who just believes. What the is this?
And I know from our 21st century perspective, perhaps that may not strike you as all that remarkable, but compare this declaration to other ancient beliefs, such as these words from the 5th century BC Greek philosopher Plato, who said this: "It is only males who are created directly by the gods and are given souls."
The church was restored in a time of intense racial hatred.
We're talking about people on the pulpit saying black people will not be saved.
Yes, Christianity at the time, you had pastors advocating for slavery, and you had like horrible, horrible things.
What for you are what were some of the most problematic passages that you had to navigate through as looking through the Old Testament as a woman?
How long do you have, right? Like there's so much we can. I was working through the Bible with a girl this year actually, because she was wrestling with the same question, and we started out with her just showing me like the post-it notes she had all the way across the Old Testament, and stories of rape, polygamy, incest, violence against women. You know, it's all in the text.
When you think of Jesus Christ and Christianity, you think of someone who is all-inclusive. Everyone will be saved, you know, preach to the Gentiles and the Jews. And so it's really hard to study Christianity in the 19th century context because there was lots of hypocrisy going on.
A ton, yeah. So it's no surprise that the leaders of our church at the time had pretty racist views. I think we can just say that openly.
The bigger question had to become, okay, there are a lot of troubling things in the Bible, but why are they here? Before leaping to conclusions that they're here because God thinks it's a good idea, be that they're not there to commend the behavior, but actually to condemn it in the strongest possible terms. And could it be that the Bible is intended to be kind of a story that depicts both the highs, but also like the extreme lows of human nature? And a lot of those extreme lows involve the way that women have been treated throughout history.
Someone who says the Book of Mormon is promoting racism, I don't think they really understand it. It's more so creating a narrative of racism to condemn racism. You can't condemn it without it being there, right? If they just said, by the way, racism is bad, that's not as powerful as showing how they kind of create this standard of peoples and then how God's going to condemn it. And we always say in our church, the Book of Mormon is for our day. And racism, unfortunately, is still a big part of society.
I kind of get why those stories are there now. But for me, therefore, the harder things are some of the legal codes, right? Because when it comes to the narratives of the Old Testament, you can say, well, these are here as examples of people behaving badly. But what about the legal codes? Because the legal codes are, if they're laws given by God, then how do you make sense of the fact that some of those laws are really hard to get to grips with? And you can't just say, oh, it's people behaving badly, unless you're going to write off the codes and say, well, they're just written by people. But that's not actually my conviction.
But I think it's also important to remember that the views that they had that were racist are not doctrine. They're not true, and we don't have to look at them as if they're from a God.
Now we could just ignore all those racist things that they were said because they weren't doctrine, right? But is that true? Like, how would we find that out? Well, what if a member had written to the first presidency in the past and said, hey, is this stuff doctrine? Because in the modern day, we listen to the prophets and we take them at their word. If they tell us something is doctrine, we believe it's doctrine. And so the same thing is true back in the time before the priesthood ban. This did happen. And they clarified exactly what the teaching was regarding race. Now let's just take a look at some excerpts from that letter and see if the brethren at that time were teaching it as doctrine. The attitude of the church with reference to Negroes remains as it has always stood. It is not a matter of declaration of a policy, but of direct commandment from the Lord, on which is founded the doctrine of the church from the days of its organization, to the effect that Negroes may become members of the church, but that they are not entitled to the priesthood at the present time.
Now, for those who take the position that they don't believe women should be in church leadership, it's not because they think that men and women aren't equal. They just think that actually God has made us different. And part of that difference is to do with the roles that he's given us.
So there's a famous quote by Joseph Smith in which he says, if I had anything to do with the Negro, I would confine them to their own species and put them on equalization. So he has sort of a separate but equal mentality.
Response for those who say, actually, there is a distinction made within the Bible. They'll normally look at a particular text in 1 Timothy 2, which says, I don't allow a woman to teach or have authority over a man.
So when Brigham Young was prophet, he put a ban on those black men in the church, and they could not have access to the priesthood. Black people could not hold the priesthood.
And then they'll point back to Eve as an example of the woman who sinned first. So,
unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee.
The founder of Mormonism, Joseph Smith, believed that the black race was cursed by God to be the servants of a more blessed people. In the Book of Mormon, we read that when a group of people turned away from God, he cursed them with the skin of blackness and a loathsome appearance. Alternatively, those who followed God were blessed to remain white and delightsome.
But above all, I just really want to affirm that that actually we see women doing remarkable things throughout the New Testament. We then have Lydia, who is hosting a house church in Acts. You have women who are praying and prophesying and having roles within the church, public roles all the time. We have the 4 unmarried daughters of Philip who are prophesying. You see women who are called deacons, which was certainly a position of leadership within the church, even if that's not necessarily a pastoral senior position. But you also, you have Priscilla, and we're told that Priscilla teaches Apollos. She actually teaches him from the Bible. And lastly, you also have Junia in Romans 16, a woman who's described as being outstanding among the apostles.
Joseph Smith, the founder of the church, during his lifetime, black men could hold the priesthood. And we actually know of a couple. So there's someone named Elijah Abel. He was ordained to the priesthood by Joseph Smith's father. He served a mission to convert people to the church. There was Q. Walker Lewis, who was also a black man who was ordained to hold the priesthood. There are a number. And there's a woman in LDS history named Jane Manning James. She has a vision of Joseph Smith and the restoration, and she feels like God has told her to go and join the Latter-day Saints. So she leads a group of black people to do that. And when she gets to Nauvoo, Illinois, Joseph Smith says, you can live with us. Men and women alike, just be encouraged that actually whoever you are, God has a plan for your life, that he has a role for you. You are specifically made to take part in this amazing story that he's writing through history, and male and female, that is a privilege that we both have the opportunity to do that.
All are alike unto God, black, white, male, female, all are of the same blood, all are of the same, line in the plan of salvation.
In fact, I'm going to go out on a leg and say this is the best church for black people, because this is the best church for all of God's children, because it is the restored church.
And now, some clips that have, to put it mildly, not aged well.
All racism just disappears, and we live in, Bill Cosby's sitcom. It's just Bill Cosby's sitcom. It's
Bill Cosby taken into custody today after being sentenced to 3 to 10 years in total confinement. It's the conclusion to the jury's decision back in April that found him guilty of drugging and sexually assaulting former Temple University employee Andrea Constand in 2004. 81-year-old Cosby now classified as a sexually violent predator. More than 60 women have accused the entertainer of sexual misconduct.
New York Times reports Mormon leaders have acknowledged for the first time that the church's founder and prophet Joseph Smith, portrayed in church materials as a loyal partner to his loving spouse Emma, took as many as 40 wives, some already married, and one only 14 years old. Smith probably did not have sexual relations with all of his wives.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Some apologists try to argue that there were some types of plural marriages that Joseph entered into that weren't sexual.
Even though Mormons like to pretend that we don't know why polygamy was instituted, we do know, because God has laid out in the scriptures and why he was down for polygamy, and there is no scriptural justification for marriages that don't involve sex.
So in the Book of Mormon, if you go to Jacob 2, it actually denounces polygamy, but then leaves one caveat that says, if the Lord will raise up seed unto himself, which of course means having children. Those are the only justifications given for polygamy is having kids, which means sex. So Joseph Smith had nearly 40 wives. 3 were 17 years old, 1 was 16, and 2 were only 14 years old.
Joseph almost definitely did have sex with a 14-year-old girl, and don't listen to apologists telling you that it was normal back then, because it was absolutely not normal for girls as young as 14 to get married. There was a tiny percentage of women that would get married at 14 to other 14-year-olds, or like people generally within their age range, like a 14-year-old girl in love with a 16-year-old boyfriend or something, not to a 36-year-old man that already had a bunch more wives.
We've just had Joe Vitale, who is on our team from Oxford. She has just defended her doctoral dissertation.
It's fascinating to me that we can fall in love with someone just from watching their videos and reading their books and listening to their podcasts. They begin to inform and correct our thinking. They mentor us. We even hear their voice in our heads. And as time goes on, a relationship begins to grow and develop.
And as somebody who did get to know Ravi, I can tell you why. It's because the same man you saw on stage was the same one that you would see behind the stage.
And I'm so thankful for the legacy of Ravi Zacharias. I love the character by which he lived his life. It seemed as if he lived with uncompromising integrity.
You may not have known is that Mr. Zacharias had a side business, and it was a business that allowed him regular opportunity to be alone with women. Mr. Zacharias was in the health spa and massage business. And based on my recent interviews with one of his male business partners and with 2 women who worked in the spas, what he did in those massage rooms was not just sexual, but sexually abusive.
His ministry, RZIM, they released a statement to provide an update on the ongoing investigation, and we're going to go ahead and read it. In August 2020, allegations of misconduct were made against our founder, Ravi Zacharias. While the investigation remains ongoing and is not expected to be completed until January or February, yesterday we received a brief interim update on the investigation we felt we needed to share. Sadly, the investigation update indicates this assessment of Ravi's behavior to be true, that he did indeed engage in blank misconduct.
Could it be that the Bible isn't just written by people?
And we don't have to look at them as if they're from God.